Words in Arabic. Delightful sunsets. Mulberry trees and silkworms waiting patiently in secretive cocoons for their moment to arrive. Then he saw himself in the courtyard of his house, sitting by the well with a lantern in his hand, weeping. At the outset I had no idea what the fragments in his dreams indicated. Nothing seemed familiar. But then one day, after I had received a silk scarf as a gift, the answer came to me and the riddle was solved. I remembered how you were fond of silk and silkworms. I recalled the wonderful things I had heard about your tariqah. And it dawned upon me that the place Rumi saw in his dreams was none other than your dervish lodge. In short, my brother, I can't help wondering whether Rumi's companion lives under your roof. Hence the reason I write this letter. I don't know if there is such a person in your lodge. But if there is, I leave it in your hands to inform him about the destiny that awaits him. If you and I can play even a minute role in helping two rivers meet and flow into the ocean of divine love as one single watercourse, if we can help two good friends of God to meet, I will count myself blessed. There is, however, one thing you need to take into consideration. Rumi might be an influential man adored and respected by many, but that doesn't mean he does not have critics. He does. Furthermore, such a flowing together might generate discontent and opposition and cause rivalries beyond our comprehension. His fondness of his companion might also cause problems in his family and inner circle. The person who is openly loved by someone who is admired by so many people is bound to draw the envy, if not the hatred, of others. All of this might put the companion of Rumi in unpredictable danger. In other words, my brother, the person you send to Konya might never make it back. Therefore, before reaching a decision as to how to reveal this letter to Rumi's companion, I ask you to give the matter considerable thought. I am sorry to put you in a difficult position, but as we both know, God never burdens us with more than we can bear. I look forward to your answer and trust that whatever the outcome, you will take the right steps in the right direction. May the light of faith never cease to shine upon you and your dervishes. Master Sayyid Buraneddin Shams Baghdad, December 18, 1243. Beyond dangling icicles and snow-covered roads, a messenger appeared in the distance. He said he came from Kayseri, and caused a stir among the dervishes, who knew visitors to be scarcer than sweet summer grapes at this time of the year. A messenger with a message urgent enough to be carried through snowstorms could only mean one of two things. Either something terrible had happened or something important was about to happen. The arrival of the messenger set tongues wagging in the dervish lodge, as everyone was curious about the content of the letter handed to the master. But, shrouded in a cloak of mystery, he gave no hints whatsoever. Stolid and ruminant, and zealously guarded, for days he bore the expression of a man struggling with his conscience, finding it hard to reach the right decision. During that time it wasn't sheer curiosity that prompted me to closely observe Baba Zaman. Deep inside, I sensed that the letter concerned me personally, although in what way I could not tell. I spent many evenings in the praying room reciting the 99 names of God for guidance. Each time one name stood out, Al-Jabbar, the one in whose dominion nothing happens except that which he has willed. In the following days, while everyone in the lodge was making wild speculations, I spent my time alone in the garden, observing Mother Nature now cuddled under a heavy blanket of snow. Finally one day we heard the copper bell in the kitchen ring repeatedly, calling us all for an urgent meeting. Upon entering the main room in the Kaneka, I found everyone present there, novices and senior dervishes alike, sitting in a wide circle. And in the middle of the circle was the master, his lips neatly pursed, his eyes hazy. After clearing his throat, he said, "Bismillah, you must be wondering why I summoned you here today. It is about this letter I received. It doesn't matter where it came from. Suffice it to say that it drew my attention to a subject of great consequence." Baba Zaman paused briefly and stared out the window. He looked fatigued, thin, and pale, as if he had aged considerably during these past days. But when he continued to speak, an unexpected determination filled his voice. "There lives an erudite scholar in a city not far away. He is good with words, but not so with metaphors, for he is no poet. He is loved, respected, and admired by thousands, but he himself is not a lover. Because of reasons far beyond me and you, someone from our lodge might have to go to meet him and be his comrade." My heart tightened in my chest. I exhaled slowly, very slowly. I couldn't help remembering one of the rules. Loneliness and solitude are two different things. When you are lonely, it is easy to delude yourself into believing that you are on the right path. Solitude is better for us, as it means being alone without feeling lonely. But eventually it is best to find a person, the person who will be your mirror. Remember, only in another person's heart can you truly see yourself and the presence of God within you. The Master continued, I am here to ask if any one of you would like to volunteer for this spiritual journey. I could just as well have appointed someone, but this is not a task that could be performed out of duty. For it can be done only out of love and in the name of love. A young dervish asked permission to speak. Who is this scholar, Master? I can reveal his name only to the one who is willing to go. Upon hearing this, several dervishes raised their hands, excited and impatient. There were 9 candidates. I joined them, becoming the 10th. Baba Zaman waved his hand, gesturing at us to wait for him to finish. There is something else you should know before you make up your mind. With that, the Master told us the journey was beset with great danger and unprecedented hardships, and there was no guarantee of coming back. Instantly all the hands went down. Except mine. Baba Zaman looked me straight in the eye for the first time in a long while, and as soon as his gaze met mine, I understood he knew right from the start that I would be the only one to volunteer. Shams of Tabriz, the Master said slowly and dully, as if my name left a heavy taste in his mouth. I respect your determination, but you are not fully a member of this order. You are our guest. I don't see how that could be a problem, I said. The Master was silent for a long, reflective moment. Then, unexpectedly, he came to his feet and concluded, let's drop this subject for the time being. When spring comes, we will talk again. My heart rebelled. Though he knew that this mission was the sole reason I had come to Baghdad in the first place, Baba Zaman was robbing me of the chance to fulfill my destiny. Why, Master, why wait when I am ready to go this very moment? Just tell me the name of the city and the scholar and I will be on my way. I exclaimed. But the Master retorted in a cold, stern voice I wasn't used to hearing from him, there is nothing to discuss. The meeting is over. It was a long, harsh winter. The garden was frozen stiff, and so were my lips. For the next 3 months, I didn't speak a word to anyone. Every day I took long walks in the countryside, hoping to see a tree in blossom. But after snow came more snow. Spring wasn't anywhere on the horizon. Still, as low-spirited as I was outside, I remained grateful and hopeful inside, keeping in mind yet another rule. There was a rule that suited my mood. Whatever happens in your life, no matter how troubling things might seem, do not enter the neighborhood of despair. Even when all doors remain closed, God will open up a new path only for you. Be thankful. It is easy to be thankful when all is well. A Sufi is thankful not only for what he has been given but also for all that he has been denied. Then finally one morning, I caught sight of a dazzling color, as delightful as a sweet song, sticking out from under the piles of snow. It was a bush clover covered with tiny lavender flowers. My heart filled with joy. As I walked back to the lodge, I ran into the ginger-haired novice and saluted him merrily. He was so used to seeing me fixed in a grumpy silence that his jaw dropped. Smile, boy, I yelled. Don't you see spring is in the air? From that day on, the landscape changed with remarkable speed. The last snow melted, the trees budded, sparrows and wrens returned, and before long a faint spicy smell filled the air. One morning we heard the copper bell ring again. I was the first to reach the main room this time. Once again we sat in a wide circle around the Master and listened to him talk about this prominent scholar of Islam who knew everything, except the pits of love. Again no one else volunteered. I see that Shams is the only one to volunteer, Baba Zaman announced, his voice rising in pitch and thinning out like the howl of the wind. But I'll wait for autumn before reaching a decision. I was stunned. I could not believe that this was happening. Here I was, ready to leave after 3 long months of postponement, and the Master was telling me to put my journey off for another 6 months. With a plunging heart, I protested and complained and begged the Master to tell me the name of the city and the scholar, but once again he refused. This time, however, I knew it was going to be easier to wait, for there could be no further delays. Having endured from winter to spring, I could hold my fire from spring to autumn. Baba Zaman's rejection had not disheartened me. If anything, it had raised my spirits, deepening my determination. Another rule said, patience does not mean to passively endure. It means to be farsighted enough to trust the end result of a process. What does patience mean? It means to look at the thorn and see the rose, to look at the night and see the dawn. Impatience means to be so short-sighted as to not be able to see the outcome. The lovers of God never run out of patience, for they know that time is needed for the crescent moon to become full. When in autumn the copper bell rang for the third time, I walked in unhurriedly and confidently, trusting that now things would finally be settled. The master looked paler and weaker than ever, as if he had no more energy left in him. Nevertheless, when he saw me raise my hand again, he neither looked away nor dropped the subject. Instead he gave me a determined nod. All right, Shams, there is no question you are the one who should embark on this journey. Tomorrow morning you'll be on your way, inshallah. I kissed the master's hand. At long last I was going to meet my companion. Baba Zaman smiled at me warmly and thoughtfully, the way a father smiles at his only son before sending him to the battlefield. He then took out a sealed letter from inside his long khaki robe and, after handing it to me, silently left the room. Everyone else followed suit. Alone in the room, I broke the wax seal. Inside, there were 2 pieces of information written in graceful handwriting. The name of the city and the scholar. Apparently I was going to Konya to meet a certain Rumi. My heart skipped a beat. I had never heard his name before. He could be a famous scholar for all I knew, but to me he was a complete mystery. One by one, I said the letters of his name: the powerful, lucid R, the velvety U, the intrepid and self-confident M, and the mysterious I, yet to be solved. Bringing the letters together, I repeated his name over and over again until the word melted on my tongue with the sweetness of candy and became as familiar as water, bread, or milk. Ella Northampton, May 22, 2008. Beneath her white duvet, Ella swallowed past a sore throat, feeling worn out. Staying up late and drinking more than her usual limit several nights in a row had taken their toll. Still, she went downstairs to prepare breakfast and sat at the table with her twins and her husband, doing her best to look interested in their ongoing chatter about the coolest cars at school when all she wanted was to go back to bed and sleep. All of a sudden, Orly turned to her mother and inquired, "Avi says our sister isn't going to come home again. Is that true, Mom?" Her voice reeked of suspicion and accusation. "Of course that's not true. Your sister and I had a quarrel, as you know, but we love each other," Ella said. "Is it true that you gave Scott a call and asked him to dump Jeanette?" Avi asked with a grin, apparently enjoying the subject immensely. Ella glanced at her husband with widened eyes, but David raised his eyebrows and flipped his hands open to indicate it wasn't he who'd told them such a thing. With practiced ease, Ella gave her voice the authoritarian tone she used when giving instructions to her children. "That's not quite right. I did speak with Scott, but I did not tell him to dump your sister. All I said was not to rush into marriage. I'm never going to get married," Orly announced with certitude. "Yeah, as if any guy would want to have you as his wife." Avi snapped. While she listened to her twins tease each other, for reasons she couldn't understand, Ella felt a nervous smile settle on her mouth. She suppressed it, but the smile was there, carved under her skin, as she walked them to the door and wished them all a nice day. Only when she returned to her seat at the table could she get rid of the smile, and she did that simply by allowing herself to sulk. The kitchen looked as if it had been attacked by an army of rats. Half-eaten scrambled eggs, unfinished bowls of cereal, and dirty mugs cluttered the counter. Spirit was pacing the floor, eager to go out for a walk, but even after 2 cups of coffee and a multivitamin drink, all Ella could manage was to take him out into the garden for a few minutes. Back from the garden, Ella found the red light flashing on the answering machine. She pressed the button, and to her great delight Jeanette's melodious voice filled the room. "Mom, are you there?" "Well, I guess not, or you would have picked up the phone." She chuckled. "Okay, I was so angry at you I didn't want to see your face again. But now I'm cool about it. I mean, what you did was wrong, that's for sure. You should never have called Scott. But I can understand why you did it. Listen, you don't need to protect me all the time. I'm not that premature baby who needed to be kept in an incubator anymore. Stop being overprotective, just let me be, okay?" Ella's eyes filled with tears. The sight of Jeanette as a newborn baby flashed across her mind. Her skin utterly red and sad, her little fingers wrinkled and almost transparent, her lungs attached to a breathing tube. She was so unprepared for this world. Ella had spent many a sleepless night listening to her breathing just to make sure she was alive and would survive. "Mom, one more thing," added Jeanette, like an afterthought. "I love you." On that cue Ella let out a deep breath. Her mind shifted to Aziz's email. The wish tree had granted his wish. At least the first part of it. By giving her a call, Jeanette had done her part. Now it fell upon Ella to fulfill the rest. She called her daughter's cell phone and found her on her way to the campus library. "I got your message, honey. Listen, I'm so sorry. I want to apologize to you." There was a pause, brief but charged. "That's all right, Mom." "No, it's not. I should have shown more respect for your feelings. Let's leave it all behind, shall we?" said Jeanette, as though she were the mother and Ella her rebellious daughter. "Yes, dear." Now Jeanette dropped her voice to a confidential mumble, as if afraid of what she was going to ask next. "What you said the other day kind of worried me. I mean, is that true? Are you really unhappy?" "Of course not," Ella answered, a bit too quickly. "I raised 3 beautiful children, how can I be unhappy?" But Jeanette didn't sound convinced. "I meant with Daddy." Ella didn't know what to say, except the truth. "Your father and I have been married a long time. It's difficult to remain in love after so many years." "I understand," said Jeanette, and, oddly, Ella had the feeling she did. After she hung up, Ella allowed herself to muse over love. She sat curled up in her rocking chair and wondered how she, hurt and cynical as she was, could ever experience love again. Love was for those looking for some rhyme or reason in this wildly spinning world. But what about those who had long given up the quest? Before the day ended, she wrote back to Aziz. "Dear Aziz, if I may, thanks for your kind and heartwarming reply, which helped me through a family crisis. My daughter and I managed to leave behind that awful misunderstanding, as you politely called it. You were right about one thing. I constantly vacillate between two opposites, aggressive and passive. Either I meddle too much in the lives of loved ones or I feel helpless in the face of their actions. As for submission, I've never experienced the kind of peaceful surrender you wrote to me about. Honestly, I don't think I have what it takes to be a Sufi. But I have to give you this. Amazingly, things between Jeanette and me turned out the way I wanted only after I stopped wanting and interfering. I owe you a big thank you. I, too, would have prayed for you, but it has been such a long time since I last knocked on God's door that I'm not sure if he still lives in the same place. Oops. Did I speak like the innkeeper in your story? Don't worry, I'm not that bitter. Not yet, not yet. Your friend in Northampton." Ella. The letter from Baghdad to Kayseri, September 29, 1243. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Brother Sayyid Buraneddin, peace be on you, and the mercy of God, and his blessings. I was very pleased to receive your letter and learn that you were as devoted to the path of love as ever. And yet your letter also put me in a quandary. For as soon as I learned you were looking for the companion of Rumi, I knew who you were talking about. What I did not know was what to do next. You see, there was under my roof a wandering dervish, Shams of Tabriz, who fit your description to the letter. Shams believed he had a special mission in this world, and to this end he wished to enlighten an enlightened person. Looking for neither disciples nor students, he asked God for a companion. Once he said to me that he hadn't come for the common people. He had come to put his finger on the pulse of those who guided the world to the truth. When I received your letter, I knew that Shams was destined to meet Rumi. Still, to make sure every one of my dervishes got an equal chance, I gathered them and without going into any details told them about a scholar whose heart had to be opened. Though there were a few candidates, Shams was the only one who persevered even after hearing about the dangers of the task. That was back in winter. The same scene was repeated in spring and then in autumn. You might be wondering why I waited this long. I have thought hard about this and frankly can offer only one reason. I have grown fond of Shams. It pained me to know that I was sending him on a dangerous journey. You see, Shams is not an easy person. As long as he lived a nomadic life, he could manage it pretty well, but if he stays in a town and mingles with the townspeople, I am afraid he will ruffle some feathers. This is why I tried to postpone his journey as long as I could. The evening before Shams left, we took a long walk around the mulberry trees where I grow silkworms. Old habits rarely die, painfully delicate and surprisingly strong. Silk resembles love. I told Shams how the silkworms destroy the silk they produce as they emerge from their cocoons. This is why the farmers have to make a choice between the silk and the silkworm. More often than not, they kill the silkworm while it is inside the cocoon in order to pull the silk out intact. It takes the lives of hundreds of silkworms to produce one silk scarf. The evening was now coming to an end. A chilly wind blew in our direction, and I shivered. In my old age, I get cold easily, but I knew it wasn't my age that caused this shiver. It was because I realized this was the last time Shams would stand in my garden. We will not see each other again. Not in this world. He, too, must have sensed it, for there was now sorrow in his eyes. This morning at the crack of dawn, he came to kiss my hand and ask for my blessings. I was surprised to see he had cut his long dark hair and shaved his beard, but he didn't offer an explanation and I didn't ask. Before he left, he said his part in this story resembled the silkworm. He and Rumi would retreat into a cocoon of divine love, only to come out when the time was ripe and the precious silk woven. But eventually, for the silk to survive, the silkworm had to die. Thus he left for Konya. May God protect him. I know I have done the right thing, and so have you, but my heart is heavy with sadness, and I already miss the most unusual and unruly dervish my lodge has ever welcomed. In the end we all belong to God, and to him we shall return. May God suffice you. Baba Zaman the Novice, Baghdad, September 29, 1243. Being a dervish is not easy. Everybody warned me so. What they forgot to mention was that I had to go through hell in order to become one. Ever since I came here, I have been working like a dog. Most days I work so hard that when I finally lie on my sleeping mat, I can't sleep because of the pain in my muscles and the throbbing in my feet. I wonder if anybody notices how awfully I am being treated. Even if they do, they surely show no signs of empathy. And the harder I strive, the worse it seems to get. They don't even know my name. The new novice, they call me, and behind my back they whisper, that ginger-haired ignoramus. The worst by far is to work in the kitchen under the supervision of the cook. The man has a stone instead of a heart. He could have been a bloodthirsty commander in the Mongol army rather than a cook in a dervish lodge. I can't recall ever hearing him say anything nice to anyone. I don't think he even knows how to smile. Once I asked a senior dervish if all the novices had to go through the trial of working with the cook in the kitchen. He smiled mysteriously and replied, "Not all novices, only some." Then why me? Why does the master want me to suffer more than the other novices? Is it because my nofs is bigger than theirs and needs harsher treatment to be disciplined? Every day I am the first to wake up, to get water from the nearby creek. I then heat up the stove and bake the flat sesame bread. Preparing the soup to be served at breakfast is also my responsibility. It is not easy to feed 50 people. Everything needs to be cooked in cauldrons that are no smaller than bathtubs. And guess who scrubs and washes them afterward? From dawn to dusk, I mop the floors, clean the surfaces, wipe the stairs, sweep the courtyard, chop wood, and spend hours on my hands and knees to scrub the creaky old floorboards. I prepare marmalades and spicy relishes. I pickle carrots and squash, making sure there is just the right amount of salt, enough to float an egg. If I add too much or too little salt, the cook throws a fit and breaks all the jars, and I have to make everything anew. To top it all off, I am expected to recite prayers in Arabic as I perform each and every task. The cook wants me to pray aloud so that he can check whether I skip or mispronounce a word. So I pray and work and pray. The better you bear the hardships in the kitchen, the faster you will mature, son, my tormentor claims. While you learn to cook, your soul will simmer. But how long is this trial going to last? I asked him once. 1,001 days, was his answer. If Scheherazade the storyteller managed to come up with a new tale every night for that long, you, too, can endure. This is crazy. Do I resemble in the least bit that loudmouthed Scheherazade? Besides, all she did was lie on velvet cushions twiddling her toes and make up fancy stories while she fed the cruel prince sweet grapes and figments of her imagination. I don't see any hard work there. She wouldn't have survived a week if she were asked to accomplish half of my work. I don't know if anyone is counting. But I surely am. And I have 624 more days to go. The first 40 days of my trial I spent in a cell so small and low that I could neither lie down nor stand up and had to sit on my knees all the time. If I longed for proper food or some comfort, was scared of the dark or the loneliness, or God forbid had wet dreams about a woman's body, I was ordered to ring the silver bells dangling from the ceiling for spiritual help. I never did. This is not to say I never had any distracting thoughts. But what's wrong with having a few distractions when you can't even move? When the seclusion period was over, I was sent back to the kitchen to suffer at the hands of the cook. And suffer I did, but the truth is, as bitter as I might be toward him, I never broke the cook's rules, that is, until the evening Shams of Tabriz arrived. That night, when the cook finally caught up with me, he gave me the worst beating of my life, breaking willow stick after willow stick on my back. Then he put my shoes in front of the door, with their fronts pointing out, to make it clear it was time for me to leave. In a dervish lodge, they never kick you out or tell you openly that you have failed. Instead they make you silently leave. We cannot make you a dervish against your will, the cook announced. A man can bring a donkey to the water but cannot make him drink. The donkey should have it in him. There's no other way. That makes me the donkey, of course. Frankly, I would have left this place a long time ago had it not been for Shams of Tabriz. My curiosity about him kept me anchored here. I had never met anyone like him before. He feared no one and obeyed no one. Even the cook respected him. If there ever were a role model for me in this lodge, it was Shams with his charm, dignity, and unruliness. Not the humble old master. Yes, Shams of Tabriz was my hero. After seeing him, I decided I didn't need to turn myself into a meek dervish. If I spent enough time next to him, I could become just as brash, steadfast, and rebellious. So when autumn came and I realized that Shams was leaving for good, I decided to leave with him. Having made up my mind, I went to see Baba Zaman and found him sitting, reading an old book by the light of an oil lamp. "What do you want, novice?" he asked wearily, as if seeing me tired him. As forthright as I could be, I said, "I understand that Shams of Tabriz is leaving soon, master. I want to go with him. He might need company on the way." "I didn't know you cared for him so much," the master said suspiciously. "Or is it because you are looking for ways to avoid your tasks in the kitchen? Your trial is not over yet. You can hardly be called a dervish. Perhaps going on a journey with someone like Shams is my trial," I suggested, knowing that it was a bold thing to say but saying it anyhow. The master lowered his gaze, lapsing into contemplation. The longer his silence, the more I was convinced he would scold me for my insolence and call the cook to keep a better eye on me. But he did no such thing. Instead he looked at me forlornly and shook his head. "Perhaps you were not created for life in a lodge, my son. After all, out of every 7 novices that set out on this path, only one remains. My feeling is you are not fit to be a dervish and need to look for your kismet elsewhere. As for accompanying Shams on his journey, you will have to ask him about that." Thus giving me notice, Baba Zaman closed the subject with a polite but dogged gesture of his head and went back to his book. I felt sad and small, but strangely liberated. Shams, Baghdad, September 30th, 1243. Battling the winds, my horse and I sped away at the crack of dawn. Only once did I stop to look back. The dervish lodge resembled a bird's nest hidden among mulberry trees and shrubs. For a while Baba Zaman's weary face kept flickering across my mind. I knew he was concerned about me, but I saw no real reason for that. I had embarked on an inner journey of love. How could any harm come out of that? It was my 10th rule. East, west, south, or north makes little difference. No matter what your destination, just be sure to make every journey a journey within. If you travel within, you'll travel the whole wide world and beyond. Though I anticipated hardships ahead, that didn't worry me much. Whatever fate awaited me in Konya, I welcomed it. As a Sufi, I had been trained to accept the thorn with the rose, the difficulties with the beauties of life. Hence followed another rule. The midwife knows that when there is no pain, the way for the baby cannot be opened and the mother cannot give birth. Likewise, for a new self to be born, hardship is necessary. Just as clay needs to go through intense heat to become strong, love can only be perfected in pain. The night before I left the dervish lodge, I opened all the windows in my room to let the sounds and the smells of the darkness waft in. By the flickering light of a candle, I cut my long hair. Thick clusters of it fell to the floor. I then shaved my beard and mustache and got rid of my eyebrows. When done, I inspected the face in the mirror, now brighter and younger. Without any hair, my face was cleared of a name, age, or gender. It had no past or future, sealed forever in this moment. Your journey is already changing you, said the master when I went to his room to say goodbye. And it hasn't even started yet. Yes, I realized, I said softly. It is another one of the 40 rules. The quest for love changes us. There is no seeker among those who search for love who has not matured on the way. The moment you start looking for love, you start to change within and without. With a slight smile, Baba Zaman took out a velvet box and handed it to me. Inside, I found 3 things: a silver mirror, a silk handkerchief, and a glass flask of ointment. These items will help you on your journey. Use them when need be. If you ever lose self-esteem, the mirror will show your inner beauty. In case your reputation is stained, the handkerchief will remind you of how pure your heart is. As for the balm, it will heal your wounds, both inside and outside. I caressed each object, closed the box, and thanked Baba Zaman. Then there was nothing else to say. As the birds chirped and tiny dewdrops hung from the branches with the first light of the morning, I mounted my horse. I set off toward Konya, not knowing what to expect but trusting the destiny that the Almighty had prepared for me. The Novice Baghdad, September 30, 1243. Behind Shams of Tabriz, I rode my stolen horse. Hard as I tried to keep a safe distance between us, it soon proved impossible to trail him without making myself apparent. When Shams stopped at a bazaar in Baghdad to refresh himself and buy a few things for the road, I decided to make myself known and threw myself in front of his horse. "Ginger-haired ignoramus, what are you doing there lying on the ground?" Shams exclaimed from his horse, looking half amused, half surprised. I knelt, clasped my hands, and craned my neck, as I had seen beggars do, and implored, "I want to come with you. Please let me join you. Do you have any idea where I am going?" I paused. That question had never occurred to me. "No, but it makes no difference. I want to become your disciple. You are my role model. I always travel alone and want no disciples or students, thank you. And I am certainly no role model for anyone, much less for you," Shams said. "So just go on your way. But if you are still going to look for a master in the future, please keep in mind a golden rule. There are more fake gurus and false teachers in this world than the number of stars in the visible universe. Don't confuse power-driven, self-centered people with true mentors. A genuine spiritual master will not direct your attention to himself or herself and will not expect absolute obedience or utter admiration from you, but instead will help you to appreciate and admire your inner self. True mentors are as transparent as glass. They let the light of God pass through them. Please give me a chance," I implored. All the famous travelers had someone to assist them on the road, like an apprentice or something. Shams scratched his chin pensively, as if acknowledging the truth in my words. "Do you have the strength to bear my company?" he inquired. I jumped to my feet, nodding with all my heart, "I certainly do. And my strength comes from within." "Very well, then. Here is your first task. I want you to go to the nearest tavern and get yourself a pitcher of wine. You will drink it here in the bazaar." Now, I was used to scrubbing the floors with my robes, polishing pots and pans till they sparkled like the fine Venetian glass I had seen in the hands of an artisan who had escaped from Constantinople long ago when the Crusaders had sacked the city. I could chop 100 onions in one sitting or peel and mince cloves of garlic, all in the name of spiritual development. But drinking wine in the midst of a crowded bazaar to that end was beyond my ken. I looked at him in horror. "I cannot do that. If my father learns, he'll break my legs. He sent me to the dervish lodge so that I could become a better Muslim, not a heathen. What will my family and friends think of me?" I felt the burning glare of Shams on me and shivered under the pressure, just like the day I had spied on him behind closed doors. "You see, you cannot be my disciple," he pronounced with conviction. "You are too timid for me. You care too much about what other people think. But you know what? Because you are so desperate to win the approval of others, you'll never get rid of their criticisms, no matter how hard you try. I realized that my chance to accompany him was slipping away and rushed in to defend myself. How was I to know you were not asking that question on purpose? Wine is strictly forbidden by Islam. I thought you were testing me. But that would be playing God. It is not up to us to judge and measure each other's devoutness, Shams answered. I looked around in despair, not knowing what to make of his words. My mind pounded like dumpling dough. Shams went on. You say you want to travel the path, but you don't want to sacrifice anything to that end. Money, fame, power, lavishness, or carnal pleasure, whatever it is that one holds most dear in life, one should dispose of that first. Patting his horse, Shams concluded with an air of finality, I think you ought to stay in Baghdad with your family. Find an honest tradesman and become his apprentice. I have a feeling you might make a good merchant someday. But don't be a greedy one. Now, with your permission, I need to get going. With that, he saluted me one last time, kicked his horse, and galloped away, the world sliding under its thundering hoofs. I hopped onto my horse and chased him toward the outskirts of Baghdad, but the distance between us got greater and greater until he was no more than a dark spot in the distance. Even long after that spot had disappeared on the horizon, I could feel the weight of Shams's stare on me. Ella, Northampton, May 24, 2008. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Being a big believer of this saying, every morning, weekdays and weekends alike, Ella made her way to the kitchen. A good breakfast, she thought, set the tone for the rest of the day. She had read in women's magazines that families who regularly had a proper breakfast together were more cohesive and harmonious than those in which each member rushed out the door half hungry. And though she firmly believed in this research, she had yet to experience the joyful breakfast the magazines wrote about. Her breakfast experience was a collision of galaxies where every member of her family marched to a different drummer. Everyone wanted to eat a different thing at breakfast, which was entirely against Ella's notion of eating together. How could there be unity at a table when one nibbled toasted bread and jam, Jeanette, while another chomped honey-puffed cereal, Avi, and a third waited patiently to be served scrambled eggs, David, and a fourth refused to eat anything at all, Orly. All the same, breakfast was important. Every morning she prepared it, determined that no child of hers would begin the day munching on candy or some other junk food. But this morning when she entered the kitchen, instead of brewing coffee, squeezing oranges, or toasting bread, the first thing Ella did was to sit at the kitchen table and turn on her laptop. She logged onto the internet to see whether there was an email from Aziz. To her delight, there was. Dear Ella, I was so happy to learn that things have improved between you and your daughter. As for me, I left the village of Momostenango yesterday at the crack of dawn. Strange, I stayed here only a few days, and yet when the time came to bid farewell, I felt sad, almost grieved. Would I ever see this tiny village in Guatemala again? I didn't think so. Each time I say goodbye to a place I like, I feel like I am leaving a part of me behind. I guess whether we choose to travel as much as Marco Polo did or stay in the same spot from cradle to grave, life is a sequence of births and deaths. Moments are born and moments die. For new experiences to come to light, old ones need to wither away. Don't you think? While in Momostenango, I meditated and tried to visualize your aura. Before long, 3 colors came to me: warm yellow, timid orange, and reserved metallic purple. I had a feeling these were your colors. I thought they were beautiful both separately and together. My final stop in Guatemala is Chajuel, a small town with adobe houses and children with eyes wise beyond their years. In each house, women of all ages weave magnificent tapestries. I asked a granny to choose a tapestry and said it was for a lady living in Northampton. After giving it some thought, she pulled a tapestry from a huge pile behind her. I swear to God, there were more than 50 tapestries of every possible color in that pile. Yet the one she chose for you was composed of only 3 tones: yellow, orange, and purple. I thought you might like to know about this coincidence, if there is such a thing in God's universe. Does it ever occur to you that our exchange might not be a result of coincidence? Warm regards, Aziz. P.S. If you want, I can send you your tapestry via mail, or I can wait till the day we meet for coffee and bring it myself. Ella closed her eyes and tried to imagine how the colors of her aura surrounded her face. Interestingly, The image of herself that popped up in her mind was not her grown-up self but her as a child, around 7 years of age. Many things came flooding back to her, memories that she thought she had long left behind. The sight of her mother standing still with a pistachio-green apron around her waist and a measuring cup in her hand, her face an ashen mask of pain. Dangling paper hearts on the walls, bright and sparkly. And the body of her father hanging from the ceiling as if he wanted to blend with the Christmas decorations and give the house a festive look. She remembered how she had spent her teenage years holding her mother responsible for the suicide of her father. As a young girl, Ella had promised herself that when she got married, she would always make her husband happy and not fail in her marriage, like her mother. In her endeavor to make her marriage as different from her mother's as possible, she had not married a Christian man, preferring to marry inside her faith. It was only a few years earlier that Ella had stopped hating her aging mother, and though the two of them had been on good terms lately, the truth was, deep inside she still felt ill at ease when she remembered the past. Mom. Earth to mom. Earth to mom. Ella heard a ripple of giggles and whispers behind her shoulder. When she turned around, she saw 4 pairs of eyes watching her with amusement. Orly, Avi, Jeanette, and David had for once all come to breakfast at the same time and were now standing side by side inspecting her as if she were an exotic creature. From the way they looked, it seemed they had been standing there for a while, trying to get her attention. "Good morning, you all." Ella smiled. "How come you didn't hear us?" Orly asked, sounding genuinely surprised. "You seemed so absorbed in that screen," David said without looking at her. Ella's gaze followed her husband's, and there on the open screen in front of her, she saw Aziz Z. Zahara's email shining dimly. In a flash she closed her laptop, without waiting for it to shut down. "I've got a lot of reading to do for the literary agency," Ella said, rolling her eyes. "I was working on my report." "No you were not. You were reading your emails," Avi said, his face serious, matter of fact. What was it in teenage boys that made them so eager to detect everyone's flaws and lies? Ella wondered. But, to her relief, the others didn't seem interested in the subject. In fact, they were all looking somewhere else now, focused on the kitchen counter. It was Orly who turned to Ella, voicing the question for them all. "Mom, how come you haven't made us any breakfast this morning?" Now Ella turned to the counter and saw what they had seen. There was no coffee brewing. No scrambled eggs on the stove, no toast with blueberry sauce. She nodded repeatedly as if agreeing with an inner voice that spoke an undeniable truth. Right, she thought, how come she had forgotten the breakfast? Part 2. What are the things that are fluid, changing, and unpredictable? Rumi Konya, October 15, 1244. Bright and plump, the gorgeous full moon resembled a massive pearl hanging in the sky. I got up from the bed and looked out the window into the courtyard, awash in moonlight. Even seeing such beauty, however, did not soothe the pounding of my heart or the trembling of my hands. "Effendi, you look pale. Did you have the same dream again?" whispered my wife. "Shall I bring you a glass of water?" I told her not to worry and to go back to sleep. There was nothing she could do. Our dreams were part of our destiny, and they would run their course as God willed it. Besides, there must be a reason, I thought, that every night for the last 40 days I had been having the same dream. The beginning of the dream differed slightly each time. Or perhaps it was always the same but I entered it from a different gate each evening. On this occasion I saw myself reading the Quran in a carpeted room that felt familiar but was like no place I had been before. Right across from me sat a dervish, tall, thin, and erect, with a veil on his face. He was holding a candelabrum with 5 glowing candles providing me with light so that I could read. After a while I lifted my head to show the dervish the verse I was reading, and only then did I realize, to my awe, that what I thought was a candelabrum was in fact the man's right hand. He had been holding out his hand to me, with each one of his fingers aflame. In panic I looked around for water, but there was none in sight. I took off my cloak and threw it on the dervish to extinguish the flames. But when I lifted the cloak, he had vanished, leaving only a burning candle behind. From this point onward, it was always the same dream. I started to look for him in the house, searching every nook and cranny. Next I ran into the courtyard, where the roses had blossomed in a sea of bright yellow. I called out left and right, but the man was nowhere to be seen. Come back, beloved. Where are you? Finally, as if led by an ominous intuition, I approached the well and peered down at the dark waters churning below. At first I couldn't see anything, but in a little while the moon showered me in its glittering light and the courtyard acquired a rare luminosity. Only then did I notice a pair of black eyes staring up at me with unprecedented sorrow from the bottom of the well. They killed him, somebody shouted. Perhaps it was me. Perhaps this was what my own voice would sound like in a state of infinite agony. And I screamed and screamed until my wife held me tight, drew me to her bosom, and asked softly, Effendi, did you have the same dream again? After Kara went back to sleep, I slipped into the courtyard. In that moment I had the impression that the dream was still with me, vivid and frightening. In the stillness of the night, the sight of the well sent a shiver down my spine, but I couldn't help sitting next to it, listening to the night breeze rustle gently through the trees. At times like these, I feel a sudden wave of sadness take hold of me, though I can never tell why. My life is complete and fulfilled, in that I have been blessed with the three things I hold most dear: knowledge, virtue, and the capability to help others find God. At age 38, I have been given by God more than I could ever have asked for. I have been trained as a preacher and a jurist and initiated into the science of divine intuition, the knowledge given to prophets, saints, and scholars in varying degrees. Guided by my late father, educated by the best teachers of our time, I have worked hard to deepen my awareness with the belief that this was the duty God had assigned me. My old master Sayyid Burhanuddin used to say I was one of God's beloved, since I was given the honorable task of delivering his message to his people and helping them differentiate right from wrong. For many years I have been teaching at the madrasa, discussing theology with other Sharia scholars, instructing my disciples, studying law and hadiths, giving sermons every Friday at the biggest mosque in town. I have long lost track of the number of students I have tutored. It is flattering to hear people praise my preaching skills and tell me how my words changed their lives at a time when they most needed guidance. I am blessed with a loving family, good friends, and loyal disciples. Never in my life have I suffered destitution or scarcity, although the loss of my first wife was devastating. I thought I would never get married again, but I did, and thanks to Kara I have experienced love and joy. Both of my sons are grown, although it never ceases to amaze me to see how different from each other they turned out to be. They are like two seeds that, though planted side by side in the same soil and nourished with the same sun and water, have blossomed into completely different plants. I am proud of them, just as I am proud of our adopted daughter, who has unique talents. I am a happy, satisfied man both in my private life and in the community. Why, then, do I feel this void inside me, growing deeper and wider with each passing day? It gnaws at my soul like a disease and accompanies me wherever I go, as quiet as a mouse and just as ravenous. Shams, Konya, October 17, 1244. Before passing through the gates of a town I've never visited, I take a minute to salute its saints, the dead and the living, the known and the hidden. Never in my life have I arrived at a new place without getting the blessing of its saints first. It makes no difference to me whether that place belongs to Muslims, Christians, or Jews. I believe that the saints are beyond such trivial nominal distinctions. A saint belongs to all humanity. So when I saw Konya for the first time from a distance, I did what I always did. But something unusual happened next. Instead of greeting me back and offering their blessings, as they always did, the saints remained as silent as broken tombstones. I saluted them again, more loudly and assertively this time, in case they had not heard me. But once again there followed silence. I realized that the saints had heard me, all right. They just weren't giving me their blessing. Tell me what's wrong. I asked the wind so that it would carry my words to the saints far and wide. In a little while, the wind returned with an answer. "O dervish, in this city you'll find only two extremes, and nothing in between. Either pure love or pure hatred. We are warning you. Enter at your own risk." "In that case there is no need to worry," I said. "As long as I can encounter pure love, that'll be enough for me." Upon hearing that, the saints of Konya gave me their blessing. But I didn't want to enter the city just yet. I sat down under an oak tree, and as my horse munched on the sparse grass around, I looked at the city looming in the distance. The minarets of Konya glistened in the sun like shards of glass. Every now and then, I heard dogs barking, donkeys braying, children laughing, and vendors yelling at the top of their lungs, ordinary sounds of a city throbbing with life. What kinds of joys and sorrows, I wondered, were being lived at this moment behind closed doors and latticed windows? Being used to an itinerant life, I found it slightly unnerving to have to settle in a city, but I recalled another fundamental rule: try not to resist the changes that come your way. Instead, let life live through you. And do not worry that your life is turning upside down. How do you know that the side you are used to is better than the one to come? A friendly voice yanked me out of my reverie. Selamun Aleyküm, dervish. When I turned around, I saw an olive-skinned, brawny peasant with a drooping mustache. He was riding a cart pulled by an ox so skinny that the poor thing looked as if it could at any moment breathe its last. Alaikum salam, may God bless you. I called out. Why are you sitting here on your own? If you are tired of riding that horse of yours, I could give you a lift. I smiled. Thanks, but I think I could go faster on foot than with your ox. Don't sell my ox short, the peasant said, sounding offended. He might be old and frail, but he's still my best friend. Put in my place by these words, I jumped to my feet and bowed before the peasant. How could I, a minor element in God's vast circle of creation, belittle another element in the circle, be it an animal or a human being? I apologize to you and your ox, I said. Please forgive me. A shadow of disbelief crossed the peasant's face. He stood deadpan for a moment, weighing whether I was mocking him or not. Nobody ever does that, he said when he spoke again, flashing me a warm smile. You mean apologize to your ox? Well, that, too. But I was thinking nobody ever apologizes to me. It's usually the other way round. I am the one who says sorry all the time. Even when people do me wrong, I apologize to them. I was touched to hear that. The Quran tells us each and every one of us was made in the best of molds. It's one of the rules, I said softly. What rule? He asked. God is busy with the completion of your work, both outwardly and inwardly. He is fully occupied with you. Every human being is a work in progress that is slowly but inexorably moving toward perfection. We are each an unfinished work of art, both waiting and striving to be completed. God deals with each of us separately because humanity is a fine art of skilled penmanship where every single dot is equally important for the entire picture. Are you here for the sermon, too? The peasant asked with a renewed interest. It looks like it's going to be very crowded. He is a remarkable man. My heart skipped a beat as I realized whom he was talking about. Tell me, what is so special about Rumi's sermons? The peasant fell quiet and squinted into the vast horizon for a while. His mind seemed to be everywhere and nowhere. Then he said, I come from a village that has had its share of hardships. First the famine, then the Mongols. They burned and plundered every village in their way. But what they did in the big cities was even worse. They captured Erzurum, Shivas, and Kayseri and massacred the entire male population, taking the women with them. I myself have not lost a loved one or my house. But I did lose something. I lost my joy. What's that got to do with Rumi? I asked. Dropping his gaze back to his ox, the peasant murmured tonelessly, everyone says if you listen to Rumi preach, your sadness will be cured. Personally, I didn't think there was anything wrong with sadness. Just the opposite. Hypocrisy made people happy, and truth made them sad. But I didn't tell this to the peasant. Instead I said, why don't I join you until Konya, and you'll tell me more about Rumi? I tied my horse's reins to the cart and climbed in to sit beside the peasant, glad to see that the ox didn't mind the additional load. One way or the other, it walked the same excruciatingly slow walk. The peasant offered me bread and goat cheese. We ate as we talked. In this state, while the sun blazed in an indigo sky, and under the watchful eyes of the town's saints, I entered Konya. Take good care, my friend, I said as I jumped off the cart and loosened the reins of my horse. Make sure you come to the sermon, the peasant yelled expectantly. I nodded as I waved goodbye. Inshallah. Although I was eager to listen to the sermon and dying to meet Rumi, I wanted to spend some time in the city first and learn what the townspeople thought about the great preacher. I wanted to see him through foreign eyes, kind and unkind, loving and unloving, before I looked on him with my own. Hassan the Beggar, Konya, October 17, 1244. Believe it or not, they call this purgatory on earth, holy suffering. I am a leper stuck in limbo. Neither the dead nor the living want me among them. Mothers point me out on the streets to scare their misbehaving toddlers, and children throw stones at me. Artisans chase me from their storefronts to ward off the bad luck that follows me everywhere, and pregnant women turn their faces away whenever they set eyes on me, fearing that their babies will be born defective. None of these people seem to realize that as keen as they are to avoid me, I am far keener to avoid them and their pitiful stares. It is the skin that changes first, becoming thicker and darker. Patches of varying sizes, the color of rotten eggs, appear on the shoulders, knees, arms, and face. There is a lot of stinging and burning in this phase, but then somehow the pain withers away, or else one becomes numb to it. Next the patches start to enlarge and swell up, turning into ugly bulbs. The hands turn to claws, and the face is so deformed as to be unrecognizable. Now that I am nearing the final stages, I cannot close my eyelids anymore. Tears and saliva flow without my control. 6 of the nails on my hands have fallen off, and one is on its way. Oddly enough, I still have my hair. I guess I should consider that lucky. I heard that in Europe lepers are kept outside the city walls. Here they let us live in the city as long as we carry a bell to warn other people of our presence. We are also allowed to beg, which is a good thing, because otherwise we would probably starve. Begging is one of only 2 ways to survive. The other is praying. Not because God pays special attention to lepers but because for some strange reason people think he does. Hence, as much as they despise us, the townspeople also respect us. They hire us to pray for the sick, the crippled, and the elderly. They pay and feed us well, hoping to squeeze out of our mouths a few extra prayers. On the streets, lepers might be treated worse than dogs, but in places where death and despair loom large, we are the sultans. Whenever I am hired to pray, I bow my head and make incomprehensible sounds in Arabic, pretending to be absorbed in prayer. Pretend is all I can do, for I don't think God hears me. I have no reason to believe he does. Though it is less profitable, I find begging much easier than praying. At least I am not deceiving anyone. Friday is the best day of the week to beg, except when it is Ramadan, in which case the whole month is quite lucrative. The last day of Ramadan is by far the best time to make money. That is when even the hopeless penny pinchers race to give alms, keen to compensate for all their sins, past and present. Once a year, people don't turn away from beggars. To the contrary, they specifically look for one, the more miserable the better. So profound is their need to show off how generous and charitable they are, not only do they race to give us alms, but for that single day they almost love us. Today could be a very profitable day, too, since Rumi is giving one of his Friday sermons. The mosque is already packed. Those who can't find a seat inside are lining up in the courtyard. The afternoon is the perfect occasion for panhandlers and pickpockets. And just like me, they are all present here, scattered within the crowd. I sat down right across from the entrance of the mosque with my back to a maple tree. There was a dank smell of rain in the air, mixed with the sweet, faint tang coming from the orchards far away. I put my mendicant bowl in front of me. Unlike many others in this business, I never have to openly ask for alms. A leper doesn't need to whine and implore, making up stories about how wretched his life is or how poor his health. Giving people a glimpse of my face has the effect of 1,000 words. So I simply uncovered my face and sat back. In the next hour, a few coins were dropped into my bowl. All were chipped copper. I yearned for a gold coin, with symbols of sun, lion, and crescent. Since the late Aladdin Kikubid had loosened the rules on currency, coins issued by the Beys of Aleppo, the Fatimid rulers in Cairo, and the Caliph of Baghdad, not to mention the Italian florin, were all pronounced valid. The rulers of Konya accepted them all, and so did the town's beggars. Together with the coins, a few dry leaves fell on my lap. The maple tree was shedding its reddish gold leaves, and as a gusty wind blew, quite a number of these made it into my bowl, as if the tree were giving me alms. Suddenly I realized that the maple tree and I had something in common. A tree shedding its leaves in autumn resembled a man shedding his limbs in the final stages of leprosy. I was a naked tree. My skin, my organs, my face falling apart. Every day another part of my body abandoned me. And for me, unlike the maple tree, there would be no spring in which I would blossom. What I lost forever. When people looked at me, they didn't see who I was but what I was missing. Whenever they placed a coin in my bowl, they did so with amazing speed and avoided any eye contact, as if my gaze were contagious.